Have you ever heard of a law that seems to make humanitarian aid more expensive on purpose? It sounds completely backward, I know, but it's a real, decades-old American policy, and it has these huge implications for everything from global food aid to national security. Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today, America's cargo preference laws.
So let's start with the central puzzle here. I mean, when you're talking about aid, especially food for people in a crisis, you think the goal is simple. Get the most food to the most people for every dollar you spend, right? And yet, the US government has a policy that knowingly, deliberately makes shipping that food more expensive. Why on earth would they do that?
And we're not talking about a small amount here. A report from the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, found that this policy inflates food aid shipping costs by an average of 23%. That is a huge chunk of money that could be buying more food, but instead, it's going to more expensive transportation. So, what policy is actually causing this?
The policy behind this whole costly question is a set of laws known as cargo preference. Let's break down what that actually means, because it's a big deal.
Okay, so here's the crucial point. Cargo preference laws mandate that whenever the U.S. government is footing the bill for a shipment, whether it's military gear, stuff for an embassy, or food aid, a certain percentage of that cargo has to travel on U.S.-flagged ships. That means the ships have to be owned by Americans and crewed by Americans.
Now, the rules aren't the same for everything. They actually change depending on the cargo. For military supplies, the requirement is 100%, no exceptions, it all has to go on U.S. ships. But for civilian stuff, and this includes food aid, the law says at least 50% has to. And it's this 50% rule that drives that 23% average cost increase we were just talking about.
So this all leads to the obvious question, right? Why force the government to use more expensive shipping? Well, the answer isn't about aid at all. It's about national defense.
Here's the core logic. The whole point of cargo preference is to make sure the United States always has a fleet of commercial ships, that's the merchant marine, and a pool of trained American sailors who can be called upon in a crisis. The thinking is pretty simple. You just can't rely on foreign ships and crews during a war.
Let's break that down a bit more. The idea is that by guaranteeing government cargo to U.S.-flagged ships, the policy helps keep those ships in business and American mariners employed. In return, the Department of Defense gets what it calls assured access to a logistics network it can tap into for huge sealift operations if there's a national emergency. You can really think of it as a subsidy for military readiness, just paid for through government shipping contracts.
And this sets up the fundamental conflict right at the heart of this entire debate. It's a direct trade-off between national security on one hand and aid efficiency on the other.
Let's lay it out. On one side of the scale, you've got national security. The policy maintains a ready fleet and skilled sailors, and it supports the U.S. maritime industry, ensuring we have sea lift capability in a crisis. But on the other side of that scale, that support comes at a real cost. For humanitarian programs, higher shipping prices mean less money for the actual food, which at the end of the day means fewer people can be fed for the exact same budget.
But here's the kicker. Does this trade-off actually work as intended? This is where it gets really complicated. The Government Accountability Office, the federal watchdog, investigated this, and they came to a pretty stunning conclusion. They found that the actual contribution of the food aid part of cargo preference to military sealift capability is, and I'm quoting here, unclear. In other words, we're paying this huge premium, but we might not even be getting the security benefit we think we are.
Now, for decades, this whole debate just kind of simmered in the background. But recently, the geopolitical landscape has shifted dramatically, and that has raised the stakes and forced this issue right back into the spotlight.
Just look at this chart. It tells a stark story. The People's Republic of China now builds nearly half of all commercial ships in the entire world. The United States, we build less than 1%. That dramatic decline in the American maritime industrial base has set off some serious alarm bells at the very highest levels of government.
In response to this new reality, in April 2025, the White House issued a major executive order called Restoring America's Maritime Dominance. Now, this wasn't some minor policy tweak. No way. This was a signal of a massive strategic shift.
And the language in the order is incredibly forceful. It blames decades of government neglect for empowering our adversaries and eroding United States national security. I mean, think about that. This is the government itself declaring that the decline of the U.S. maritime industry has become a critical national security crisis.
So, what's the plan? The order outlines several key actions: rebuild the industrial base, expand the workforce, secure new funding. But look at step 3. Far from getting rid of cargo preference, the new strategy is to reevaluate and potentially increase its requirements. The government is doubling down on this policy as a tool for national security.
So all this leaves us in some pretty unsettled waters. Despite years of criticism over its cost and its iffy efficiency, geopolitical competition has pushed the national security argument for cargo preference right back to the forefront.
So to quickly recap the crucial points here, cargo preference laws make us use more expensive U.S. ships. The goal is to support a domestic merchant marine for national security, but this policy directly reduces the efficiency of programs like food aid. And now, a new national strategy is poised to strengthen, not weaken, this very policy, all in response to global competition.
And that leaves us with the final, really challenging question. When every single dollar spent on more expensive shipping is a dollar not spent on food for someone in need, how do you make that choice? What is the right price for national security?